The day my daughter-in-law slid a folded document across my own kitchen table, the coffee in my mug went cold in my hands. The paper was thin, but it landed with the weight of a brick. Outside, the mail truck rattled past. But inside the house, everything felt strangely silent, like the world was holding its breath to see what I would do. "Just look it over, Evelyn," Brittany said, her voice bright and careful, the way people talk to a stranger's child. "It's just options." Options. That's what they called it. The paper was some glossy brochure for a senior living community, all smiling gray-haired people playing cards next to artificial plants. Underneath it, I could see the corner of another form, thicker paper with lines for signatures and little boxes for initials. Legal paper, the kind that can decide where you sleep at night. The clock over the stove ticked louder than it had any right to. It was 3:17 in the afternoon. Judge Judy's voice floated faintly from the living room TV. A pot of chicken soup simmered on the stove, the same way it had simmered in this kitchen for birthdays, flu seasons, and heartbreaks for almost 40 years. This was my house. Harold and I had signed the mortgage together at the First National Bank downtown, September 1987. I still have the closing statement in a blue folder in the hall closet, right next to the old tax returns and Harold's death certificate. Brittany smoothed her perfectly straight blonde hair behind one ear and looked over at my son Daniel, like maybe he would jump in and rescue her from the awkwardness. He didn't. He just sat there at the table, his hands wrapped around his phone like a life raft, his thumbs resting on the screen. "Mom," he said finally, not quite looking at me. "It's just that this place might be easier, less to worry about. Maintenance, bills, the yard, you know." I knew more about bills and yards than both of them put together. I knew what it felt like to stand in line at the electric company's office with a shut-off notice in my purse and Harold's hospital receipts in my coat pocket, hoping the check I mailed had cleared in time. I knew every creak of this house, every squeaky floorboard, the way the water pipes moaned when someone flushed upstairs. But I also knew something else they were pretending not to say out loud. They wanted the house. I looked down at the edge of that second document, the one half hidden under the senior living brochure. I could just make out quitclaim deed across the top and a typed line with space for my name. I could almost hear Harold's chuckle in the back of my mind, that low, warm sound he used when the kids were little and tried to pull a fast one on us. "Not our first rodeo, Evie," he would have said. I took a slow sip of coffee so they wouldn't see my hand shake. The mug had a faded picture of our first grandbaby, Tyler, in a pumpkin costume. He's 16 now, tall as the fridge, always hunched over those video games in the room that used to be my sewing room. "When did you print these up?" I asked, keeping my voice mild. "At the house or at the office?" Brittany blinked, surprised. At work, the firm has a standard template. I mean, it's just to make things smoother eventually. For probate. For later." She worked at a real estate office out on Route 4, the one with all the balloons tied to the open house signs. I'd watched her post listings on Facebook, always with the same caption, "Location, location, location." I was starting to realize that in her mind, I was just another piece of property with potential. Harold died 8 years ago. Heart attack in the garage, right between the lawnmower and the old tool chest his father left him. One minute, I was pouring sweet tea. The next minute, a paramedic was cutting open his shirt on the oil-stained concrete. After that, the mortgage was just mine. I wrote every check. I paid every property tax bill that came in its ugly orange envelope, every homeowner's insurance premium with his name crossed out, and mine alone printed on the policy. When Daniel lost his job 3 years ago, this house opened its arms like it always had. He and Brittany moved in, just for a few months, with their 2 kids and their dog that sheds more than it breathes. We rearranged rooms. I shifted my sewing machine into the corner of my bedroom. I added their cell phones to my internet plan because it's cheaper for one family plan, Mom. The water bill went up. The grocery receipts got longer. I started saving every one of those receipts, folding them neatly into an envelope I labeled with the month and year. A habit, I told myself. Just me being organized. But the truth is, I learned a long time ago that paper remembers what people like to forget. Now, watching my son avoid my eyes across my own kitchen table, I felt that old, tired ache in my chest. Not the sharp grief of losing Harold, but something softer and sadder. You can give a person everything you have, and they will still sometimes look at you like you're in the way. I picked up the brochure first, held it by the corner so the glossy pages didn't slip. "Looks nice," I said. "Do they let you hang your own pictures on the walls? Or is everything nailed down so the old folks don't take anything with them when they go?" Brittany laughed too quickly. "Oh, Evelyn, you're so funny." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mom, no one is trying to get rid of you." I set the brochure down and slid out the document beneath it, turning it so I could see the whole thing. I read the line with my name on it. Evelyn May Carter, an unmarried woman. The date line was blank, signature line blank, witness line blank, notary seal empty, just paper for now. "You know," I said, tracing one finger lightly along the typed words. "When your father and I bought this place, they told us to keep the original deed in a fireproof box, said it was one of the most important documents we'd ever own." Brittany smiled politely. "Oh, things are much more digital now. We have everything backed up in the system at the office." I nodded slowly. Systems are funny. They only know what people put into them. Sometimes they forget little things, like whose name is actually on the deed." That made her blink again. Daniel shifted in his chair. For the first time since I sat down, he looked straight at me. "Mom," he said softly, "you know we'd never do anything to hurt you." I watched his face, the boy I raised folded into the man sitting there. I thought about late nights at the kitchen table when he was 13 and had failed algebra, how we went through every problem on the test together until it clicked. I thought about the time I stayed in the emergency room with him all night when he broke his arm playing basketball, signing consent forms while Harold was stuck at work. Those hospital wristbands are in a box in my closet too, right next to his birth certificate. "I know what you think you'd never do," I answered. "And I know what people end up doing when money and houses and fear get mixed together." The air conditioner hummed on, blowing cool air that smelled faintly of dust. Somewhere upstairs, Tyler slammed a door and the sound carried through the vents. I folded the document neatly, crease to crease, and handed it back to Brittany. "I'll have my attorney look at it," I said. "I don't sign anything without him reading it first." She blinked. "Your attorney?" I said, getting up to stir the soup so I wouldn't have to see her face. "Same one who handled Harold's will, and the refinance, and the updated deed they filed down at the county courthouse after he passed." The wooden spoon moved in slow circles through the broth, tiny bubbles rising around the carrots. Behind me, chairs scraped. I could almost feel their confusion hanging in the air. They had forgotten something very simple. These 2 young people who lived in my house and used my Wi-Fi and accepted my help with their car insurance payments. They had forgotten that my name was not just on the mailbox. It was on the deed. I didn't sleep much that night. The house felt different, as if its walls were listening, taking in everything that had been said at the kitchen table. Around midnight, the refrigerator kicked on with a low rumble, and for a moment, it sounded like Harold clearing his throat before he spoke. I sat on the edge of my bed, fingers resting on the old cedar chest he built for me when we were first married. Inside were quilts, photo albums, and a folder thick with papers I'd guarded for decades. At 12:47 a.m., I remember the numbers glowing on the digital clock like a reminder. I pulled out one particular folder. Blue, creased at the corners, labeled in block letters. House, original. Inside were the settlement statements, the amortization schedule, tax receipts, the bank's stamped mortgage satisfaction letter, and the current deed recorded after Harold's passing. Everything crisp and neat, dated and notarized. I set them in a careful stack on my nightstand, the paper cool beneath my fingertips. Down the hall I heard muffled voices. Daniel and Brittany were arguing softly, trying not to wake the kids. The floorboards betrayed them, the same old planks Harold and I laid ourselves, one weekend in '92 when money was tight, but laughter was plenty. Now the boards carried their whispers straight to my door. "I told you she wouldn't go for it," Daniel muttered. "You said she'd be reasonable," Brittany hissed back. "She's being dramatic. No one her age wants to deal with roofs and taxes." A door shut. Silence. Then the soft buzz of Brittany's phone vibrating through the wall, the quiet tap-tap-tap of her typing. Probably texting her manager from that office on Route 4, trying to figure out how to approach the situation, as she liked to say. I knew that phrase well. I'd overheard her using it last month when she thought I couldn't hear, telling someone she might have an opportunity soon if things line up. I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly, each blade catching the moonlight sneaking through the curtains. I thought about how often people mistake kindness for weakness. They take the steady presence of an older woman as something soft, something pliable. But I've weathered more storms than they've read about in their homeowners' manuals. Morning came gray and humid, the kind of morning where the air feels like a damp cloth. I made coffee, strong the way Harold liked it, and fried 2 eggs before the kids came down the stairs. I packed their lunches while they scrolled on their phones at the table, never once glancing up. On the fridge, I saw the electric bill tucked under a magnet, still unpaid despite the extra cash I'd left on the counter 2 weeks before. After the kids left for school, Daniel appeared, bleary-eyed, holding a travel mug. "Morning, Mom." His voice was too bright, too practiced. I wiped the counter slowly. "Morning." He shifted awkwardly, tapping his fingers against the mug. "About yesterday, maybe we didn't explain things right." "I understood just fine," I said gently. He swallowed. "It's not that we want you gone. It's hard with money right now. Brittany's hours got cut, and the kids need so much. The mortgage on our old place is still—" "You mean the house you stopped paying for before you moved in here?" I said, not unkindly. His cheeks flushed. "We just need a little help. If the deed were simpler, then later, when you're older, things would be easier." There it was, that careful word, older, as if 67 were the edge of some cliff. I rinsed the dishcloth and folded it neatly over the sink. "Daniel, when your father died, you asked me if I would ever marry again. Do you remember what I told you?" He frowned. "You said you didn't want to start over." "That's right," I said. "And I feel the same way about this house. We built a life here, and I'm not ready to hand it over just because someone else believes they need it more." He sighed, long and heavy. "Mom, Brittany just worries." "That's her hobby," I said softly. "Mine is staying alive long enough to enjoy my own home." He blinked, taken aback. For the first time, he really looked at me, not as a convenience, not as a safety net, but as a person standing her ground. Before he could respond, Brittany came downstairs wearing her blazer, her hair in a tight ponytail. She avoided my eyes as she grabbed her keys from the bowl. "I'm running late," she said, though she clearly wasn't. Her voice was stiff enough to snap. When the front door closed behind them, the house settled. I heard birds outside, the neighbor's dog barking, the soft hum of the air conditioning kicking on. I poured myself another cup of coffee and carried it to the dining room. Sunlight stretched across the table, catching the grain in the wood. Then I opened my laptop. I typed a name into the browser, the attorney who helped me after Harold passed. His number appeared instantly, still saved from years ago. The office wasn't open yet, but voicemail was. I explained the situation calmly, concisely, leaving out nothing. My voice didn't shake once. When I hung up, I glanced toward the hallway closet. Inside, all those folders, all those receipts, all those years of proof waited quietly. Just like me. Not angry, not afraid, just ready. I didn't expect the call back so soon, but at 9:14 a.m., just as I was finishing my second cup of coffee, my phone lit up with the attorney's number. His voice hadn't changed. Steady, respectful, the kind that made you believe things could still be set right in the world. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "I listened to your message. Would you like to come in today? We should discuss this before anything escalates." Anything escalates. The phrase sat in the air like dust motes drifting through sunlight. I agreed to meet him at 2, slipped the blue deed folder into my tote bag, and sat quietly for a moment before standing up. My knees complained the way old friends do, familiar, predictable, nothing I couldn't manage. I spent the rest of the morning tidying the house. Not the frantic kind of cleaning people do when they expect guests, but slow, purposeful movements. Folding a dish towel, straightening the mail, wiping fingerprints off the microwave door. I found one of the kids' socks under the kitchen table, purple with little stars on it. I placed it neatly on the bottom stair, the way mothers do when they're still trying to be helpful, even when no one notices. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something else. Memory, maybe. Something warm, but worn thin. As noon approached, I changed into a light blue blouse I saved for church and doctor appointments. Harold used to say it matched my eyes. The thought made something tighten gently inside me, the way a heart tugs when touched unexpectedly. Driving downtown wasn't as easy as it used to be. The roads were busier, the stoplights faster, the turns sharper. But I made it. I always do. I parked in front of the red brick building with the ivy climbing up one side. The same building where Harold and I once sat, clutching hands as the lawyer explained probate and survivorship and all the things people don't want to think about when grief is fresh. This time, I walked in alone. The receptionist smiled warmly. "He'll be right with you, Mrs. Carter." She still remembered my name. That small kindness felt like a hand on my shoulder. When I stepped into his office, the attorney gestured toward a chair. "Tell me everything." So I did, calmly, cleanly. I described the brochure, the quitclaim deed template, the conversation over my kitchen table. I even mentioned the muffled argument I'd overheard through the wall, though I kept my voice soft. He didn't interrupt once, just listened, pen moving slowly across his legal pad. When I finished, he flipped open the blue folder I'd brought. For several minutes, the only sound was paper sliding against paper and the faint hum of the ceiling vent. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Carter, your ownership is completely secure. No one can remove you from that home unless you choose to leave. But I do think it's wise to prepare documentation, to make everything unmistakably clear. And perhaps," he added gently, "to set boundaries." Boundaries. A word I hadn't used enough in my life. Then he asked, "Do you feel unsafe, pressured, manipulated?" I stared at the framed certificates on his wall, each one dated, notarized, official. Proof that someone had earned something through effort and time. "I feel disappointed," I said, "and tired, and a little foolish." But then I breathed in deeply. "I also feel awake." He nodded as though he understood more than I said aloud. "We can take steps to protect your home and your interests. all of them completely legal. The word legal felt like a quiet victory. We spent nearly an hour reviewing options, reaffirmations of ownership, written notices, property use agreements, financial documentation. He explained everything carefully, never rushing. When he slid a packet toward me filled with clear instructions and preliminary drafts, I felt something flicker inside, a steadying, strengthening kind of heat, a sense of reclaiming myself. On my way out, I caught my reflection in the glass entry door. I looked older, yes, but also firmer somehow, more present, like a woman who finally realized she still had choices. In the car, before turning the key, I let myself sit in silence. The afternoon sun made little diamonds on the windshield. I traced one with my fingertip. Have you ever noticed the exact moment you stop being afraid? I think that was mine. When I pulled into the driveway, Brittany's car was already there. She must have gotten off work early. I saw her through the living room window, pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. Her brows were tight, her mouth sharp. She didn't see me, but I watched her gesture toward the hallway, the one that leads to my room, my closet, my papers. Something cold and clear moved through me. Not fear. No, certainty. I stepped out of the car slowly, my tote bag resting against my hip, the attorney's packet inside. The cicadas hummed from the maple trees, rhythmic and ancient, as if reminding me I came from a long line of women who endured, and endured, and endured, until one day they didn't anymore. Have you ever felt something like this? That slow, rising warmth when you finally realize you're not powerless at all? Brittany ended her call the moment I stepped through the front door, as if my presence snapped a taut thread. She straightened her blazer and smoothed her expression into something polite but strained, a woman preparing to negotiate with a person she still believed she understood. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, "we were just talking about you." We, as if forming alliances in my own living room. Daniel came from the kitchen, rubbing the back of his neck. "Mom, can we sit down for a minute?" The sun was pouring through the window behind them, outlining them like figures in a photograph I didn't remember taking. I set my tote bag on the floor beside the armchair and lowered myself into it with the calm of someone who already knows the ending of the story. "Of course," I said. "Let's talk." Brittany perched on the edge of the couch cushion, knees tight together, hands clasped. Daniel paced a little, then finally settled beside her. He looked nervous. She looked determined. "We want to apologize," she began, though her voice made it sound more like a formality. "Things got miscommunicated yesterday. We just want what's best." "Best for who?" I asked. She blinked. "For everyone." That word, everyone, drifted between us like smoke. I let a beat of silence linger before responding. "I met with my attorney today," I said gently. Daniel looked up sharply. Brittany went still. "Oh," she said, the word thin and hollow. "Already?" "Yes, he was available this afternoon." I reached into my tote bag and drew out a manila envelope, setting it on my lap without opening it. I wanted clarity, and now I have it. Daniel swallowed. "Mom, you didn't have to." "I did," I said. "Because while you two may be confused about what belongs to who, the law is not." The air in the room tightened, not in a dramatic way, just a slow inward pull, the way a house settles before a storm. "I have full legal ownership of this home," I continued softly. "Your father and I saw to that, and no amount of paperwork someone pulls from a real estate office printer can change that." Brittany's mouth pressed into a hard line. "We weren't trying to change anything without your consent." "But you were trying to guide my consent," I said. "And that's a different kind of pressure." Her cheeks colored, but she didn't argue. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. We're drowning a little, Mom. I won't lie about that. The kids need braces, the car needs repairs, and we're behind on the mortgage for the old place. When Brittany suggested the deed, she didn't suggest it, I said quietly. She prepared it. That landed. Even he couldn't deny it. I watched them, two people I'd loved and supported, now tangled in their own desperation. I wasn't angry anymore, just profoundly tired. I cooked your meals, I said, not accusing but remembering. I added your phones to my plan. I paid the utilities when you fell behind. I tucked $5 bills into the kids' backpacks for field trips. And I did it gladly, but somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing those things as kindness. They became expected. Daniel closed his eyes, a small, painful wince. And yesterday, I said softly, you forgot something important. You forgot that I'm not just the woman who holds this family together. I'm also the woman who owns this house. The silence that followed was heavy, but not cruel. After a moment, Brittany spoke, her voice thinner than usual. So, what happens now? I unfolded a single sheet from the attorney's packet and placed it on the coffee table. The neat type glowed in the afternoon light. This, I said, is a written agreement, simple, clear, and entirely legal. It outlines responsibilities for everyone living under this roof. Financial contributions, chores, personal boundaries, privacy. Daniel reached for it, but Brittany grabbed his wrist lightly, stopping him. She wasn't ready to read it yet. You're making us sign a contract? She asked. I'm offering you a way to stay, I replied. Not forever, just as long as we can live together respectfully. No pressure. If it doesn't feel right to you, you can start planning your move. For the first time, genuine worry flickered in her eyes. Daniel's voice was rough. Mom, we don't want to leave. I don't want you to, I said. But I also won't live in my own home feeling like a guest, or a burden, or a problem to be solved. The house creaked softly, as if agreeing with me. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled down the street. A neighbor's screen door slammed. Ordinary sounds on a day that felt anything but ordinary. Brittany finally released Daniel's wrist and leaned back, defeated, but quieter. We'll look it over, she murmured. Good, I said. Take your time. Ask questions. I'm not rushing you. I stood, my joints stiff but my spine straight. When I picked up my tote bag, I felt the weight of the documents inside, not heavy but grounding. As I walked toward my bedroom, I felt something unexpected stir in me. Not triumph, not revenge, just peace. A small, steady flame warming a room that had grown cold. And I wondered, not unkindly, not bitterly, how long it had been since anyone else in this house had bothered to feel the temperature of the air around them. Because I could feel it now. I was warming up. Daniel and Brittany stayed quiet the rest of the evening. Not the angry kind of quiet. More like the soft, unsettled quiet of people who suddenly realize the floor beneath them isn't as stable as they thought. I warmed up leftover chicken soup and ate at the kitchen counter while they picked at dinner with the kids, talking in low tones about homework and school projects, avoiding anything heavier. After the dishes were rinsed, I slipped into my room with a sense of calm that surprised even me. The contract sat in its envelope on my nightstand. I didn't reread it. I didn't have to. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity, and clarity has a way of softening the world around it. Later, while brushing my teeth, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My hair was pulled back, silver strands woven through like threads of frost. My face looked older, yes, but steadier somehow. My eyes were no longer searching for understanding from people unwilling to offer it. They were focused on something ahead, something that belonged to me. Around 10, the house settled into its nighttime sounds, pipes clicking softly, the refrigerator humming, distant giggles from the kids' room muffled by half-closed doors. I climbed into bed and slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Morning came crisp and clear. A thin fog hovered above the yard when I stepped outside to grab the newspaper. The grass sparkled with dew, small diamonds catching the early light. I stood for a moment, letting the quiet wrap around me. The neighborhood was waking up, garage doors opening, dogs barking, a jogger's footsteps clipping rhythmically down the sidewalk. When I came back inside, Brittany was at the kitchen table with the agreement spread out in front of her. Her hair was still damp from the shower, and she had a pen in her hand. Though she kept clicking the top of it nervously, she looked up when she saw me. "I didn't sleep much," she admitted. "That happens when something needs attention," I said softly, setting the newspaper down. She hesitated. "I read it, all of it, twice." I poured myself coffee, letting the aroma fill the room. "And? It's fair." The word came out reluctantly, but honestly. "Clear, practical." "It's meant to be," I said. Daniel came downstairs, tie half straightened, rubbing his eyes. He saw the papers, saw Brittany's expression, and exhaled in a slow, weary way. "We talked last night," he said. "We want to make this work." "That's good," I replied, "because I only ask for what I already give. Structure, respect, and shared responsibility." The kids thundered down the stairs then, backpacks swinging, shoes untied. Life swept briefly back into chaos, toast burning slightly in the toaster, the dog barking at nothing, pencils scattering across the floor. Brittany snapped into mom mode, her voice sharp and quick. But I noticed something different in her manner toward me. Not warmth, not yet, but something less brittle. After they left for school, Daniel lingered by the door. "Mom, I'm sorry it took all this for us to see it." I touched his arm gently. "Sometimes people don't see the ground they stand on until it shifts. Just make sure you're looking now." He nodded, eyes full of something that mixed guilt with gratitude, then followed Brittany out to the car. When they drove off, I cleaned the kitchen slowly. I wiped crumbs from the counter, rinsed coffee cups, folded a dish towel over the oven handle. These small tasks were mine, but no longer because I was expected to do them, because I chose to. Later that afternoon, I gathered the bills from the magnet-studded refrigerator door: electric, water, internet. I sorted them at the dining table, tapping each envelope until their edges aligned neatly. A column of numbers emerged as I wrote them down in my ledger, a ledger I've kept since 1909. I added receipts for groceries, the kids' school supply list, the internet upgrade Daniel insisted on, but never reimbursed. Paper is patient. It keeps the truth even when people don't. My phone buzzed with a text from the attorney. "Let me know when they've signed. I'll file the acknowledgement letter with the county for your records." I smiled, grateful for the steadiness of someone who deals in fact rather than emotion. Around 4, Brittany returned home early again. She knocked on my bedroom door, not barged in the way she sometimes used to. "Evelyn," she said softly, "can we talk for a second?" I set aside the photo album I'd been flipping through and opened the door. She held the agreement in her hands, signed. "I just wanted to tell you, I shouldn't have handled things the way I did. I thought I was being proactive. I didn't realize how disrespectful it was." Her eyes were not angry now. They were tired, maybe humbled. I nodded. "Thank you for saying that." She took a breath. "And if you ever want help with anything, yard work, bills, errands, just ask. I don't want you feeling like you carry everything alone." There it was. Not a perfect apology, not a perfect change, but a start. A real start. "We'll figure things out together," I said softly. She gave a small, tentative smile before heading to the kitchen. That evening, the house felt different. Not entirely healed, but looser, calmer, as if something heavy had been lifted from the beams. The kids' laughter echoed down the hallway in a way I hadn't heard in months. Daniel and Brittany spoke to me without that nervous edge, and for once, I wasn't shrinking myself to keep the peace. When the day finally wound down, I stepped out onto the porch. The sky was painted in streaks of pink and gold, the kind of sunset Harold would have paused to admire with one hand shading his eyes. Cars rolled slowly down the street, porch lights flicked on one by one, and somewhere in the distance a train horn sounded low and steady. I wrapped my arms around myself, not for warmth, but for grounding. For the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel like something I was clinging to. It felt like something I was reclaiming. The next few days moved with an unusual stillness, as if the house itself were learning how to breathe again. The agreement sat signed and neatly folded in a drawer in the dining room, along with the other important papers I'd curated over a lifetime. Every now and then, I'd catch Brittany glancing toward that drawer, not with resentment, but with a quiet awareness, like someone remembering a line they crossed without meaning to. One morning, I woke before sunrise, the sky outside barely shifting from black to blue. I slipped on Harold's old flannel robe, the one I still kept because it carried the faintest scent of cedar, and padded into the kitchen. The tile was cool beneath my feet. I turned on the kettle, listening to the soft click and hum as if it were answering me. When the tea was ready, I sat at the table with the steam curling against my cheeks. The house was silent, except for the gentle whir of the refrigerator and the distant hum of a single car on the road. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Room. Space inside myself that wasn't crowded with other people's needs. Around 7, Brittany wandered into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. She paused, as if unsure whether she was welcome. I motioned toward the kettle. "There's still hot water," I said. She nodded gratefully, moving quietly, almost cautiously. We hadn't reached friendship, not yet, but we were moving away from hostility, and that was enough. While she stirred her tea, she glanced toward the fridge. "The water bill came," she said. "I saw." "I'll handle it," she added almost shyly. I put my part of the money in the envelope on the counter. I nodded. "Thank you." She sat across from me, cupping her mug. Her voice softened. I didn't grow up with boundaries or stability. My mother lived with us, then with my aunt, then with a friend, and every house came with unspoken rules that usually exploded into arguments. I guess I never learned how to live with older family without overstepping. Her eyes glistened. Not tears, just truth. I looked at her for a long moment. "You're learning," I said. "We all are." She smiled a little, and the tension in her shoulders eased. When she left for work, the sun had fully risen, spreading a warm gold wash across the living room. I stood there for a while, letting the light touch my face. It reminded me of mornings long ago, when Harold would read the newspaper while I made pancakes, and Daniel would run through the house in a cape made from an old towel, saving imaginary worlds before breakfast. Life has a way of circling back, bringing us face to face with versions of ourselves we forgot we ever were. That afternoon, I had errands to run. A stop at the bank to deposit a small check from a local quilting show, then the grocery store. The bank teller knew me by name. "Miss Carter, that quilt of yours at the fair was beautiful." And her warm tone reminded me that not everyone saw me as something to push aside. At the grocery store, I bumped into Mrs. Whitfield from down the street. She asked how I was doing, said she noticed the family staying with me, and hoped it wasn't too much for me. I found myself smiling instead of sighing. "It's getting easier," I said, and I meant it. Back home, I organized the pantry, dusted the baseboards, and finally opened the windows to let in fresh air. The curtains fluttered like soft wings. The house smelled of cinnamon from the candle I'd lit, clean and bright. When Daniel came home that evening, He found me in the garden, trimming the rose bushes. "Mom," he said, stepping onto the porch. "The agreement, it made me think. I talked to a loan officer today. We're working on a plan to fix things with the old house. I should have done it months ago." "That's good," I said, clipping a wilted bloom. "Facing things is always better than avoiding them." He sat on the porch steps, elbows on his knees, the same posture he'd had at 15 when he'd confessed to breaking a neighbor's window with a baseball. "Some things never change." "I don't want you to feel like we're using you," he said quietly. I cleaned dirt from my gloves. Wanting help isn't wrong. Expecting it without gratitude, that's where trouble starts. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for that." I felt something loosen in the air between us, something that had been stretched too thin. The sky dimmed into soft purples, cicadas starting their nightly choir. I could feel an ache deep in my chest, not pain, but a tender swelling of something old and familiar. A question rose inside me then, gentle but unavoidable. Have you ever realized too late that you were being used, and then even later realized you didn't have to stay that way? That evening, when the kids came running through the living room, their backpacks bouncing, their voices full of life, I stood in the doorway watching them. This house had held so much over the years. Birthdays, heartbreaks, Christmas mornings, late-night fevers. It had shape-shifted through decades, accommodating the lives inside it. And now it was shifting again, but this time in a way that made room for me too. After dinner, I sat in my favorite armchair with the window cracked open, letting the cool night breeze brush my face. The moon hung low, pale and steady. Somewhere down the street, a porch light flicked on, and a dog barked once before settling. I breathed in deeply. For the first time in a long time, I felt not just present, but at peace with the direction I was walking. A week later, something unexpected arrived in the mail, an envelope from the county assessor's office. At first glance, my stomach fluttered the way it always did when official envelopes showed up, as if bad news had made a habit of coming dressed in government stationery. But when I opened it, I found something simple. A routine request for updated occupancy information for property tax records. Normal, ordinary, and strangely timely. I filled it out at the dining table, the morning sun warming the wood beneath my elbows. As I listed the number of residents in the house, I paused. For years I had simply written 1, then 1 plus temporary family, hoping that label would gently nudge the universe to remind them that they were guests, not owners. This time, I wrote the names clearly. Mine first, the legal owner, the responsible party, and I checked the box that said primary resident. It felt small, almost silly, but the act steadied me in a way I didn't expect. As I sealed the envelope, I heard the front door open. Daniel's voice drifted in, low and steady, speaking to someone on the phone. Something about refinancing terms. He sounded firm, not panicked or desperate, just accountable. It was new and welcome. He walked into the dining room still holding the phone. "Yeah, Thursday works," he said, then paused when he saw me. "Great, I'll bring the paperwork." He hung up slowly. "Mom, that was the bank. The refinance is moving forward." I smiled. "I'm glad." "You were right," he said, "about everything. I should have faced the mess earlier." I gathered the mail into a neat pile. Sometimes people don't face things because they're afraid of losing what little they think they have. Daniel leaned on the back of a chair, his expression thoughtful in a way I rarely saw. "I didn't realize how much we were leaning on you, not in a supportive way, in a careless way." I didn't correct him. He was finally speaking clearly, and I wasn't about to interrupt that. Later that day, after everyone left for work and school, I walked through the house with a basket of laundry. The rhythm of folding warm clothes always soothed me. Harold used to tease me about how precise I was with corners. "You fold towels like you're drafting architectural plans," he'd say. But I liked bringing order to simple things. When I reached the upstairs hallway, I noticed something peculiar. The kids' rooms were a mess, of course. Socks on the floor, toys scattered like confetti. But Brittany and Daniel's room, usually rushed and chaotic in the mornings, had been tidied. The bed was made. Their closet doors were closed, and on the dresser sat a stack of files tied neatly with a rubber band, old mortgage papers from their previous house. I froze, laundry basket resting on my hip, not because I was shocked, but because I recognized the shift. They were taking responsibility for their own burdens instead of trying to lighten them by dropping them at my feet. Quiet changes often matter more than loud apologies. I set the laundry down in the hamper and went downstairs. The house was warm, full of soft afternoon light. I opened my laptop to check my email and found a message from the attorney confirming the filing of our signed residential agreement. Simple, official, airtight. Seeing it in writing made something deep inside me unclench. Around 4, the kids burst through the door, backpacks thumping, shoes kicked off in the hallway. They told me about spelling tests and cafeteria pizza and how Tyler's science project volcano nearly exploded in the classroom sink. Their voices rose and tangled with laughter, filling the house with a kind of noise I loved, messy, alive, innocent. While the pasta boiled on the stove, Brittany came home from work. She stood beside me at the counter, chopping tomatoes without being asked. Her movements were careful at first, as if she didn't want to intrude, but after a few minutes she fell into an easy rhythm. "I talked to my boss today," she said. "Told her I need to reduce my extra hours. I can't keep juggling everything and letting the house run on autopilot." I glanced at her. "That sounds like a reasonable step." She nodded, breathing out. "It feels like one." We cooked quietly together, not the tense silence from before, but a new one, comfortable, steady. She handed me the cutting board, and our eyes met for a moment. There was gratitude there, maybe a touch of respect. After dinner, when the dishes were done and the kids were upstairs arguing about who got the last clean towel, I stepped out onto the back porch. The sun was melting into the horizon, streaks of orange and purple settling low against the trees. The air smelled of cut grass and distant charcoal from a neighbor's grill. I sat in the porch swing Harold built one summer when Daniel was still small. The chains creaked softly as I rocked, a sound that felt like memory itself. Fireflies blinked on in the yard, tiny lanterns drifting lazily through the dusk. For the first time in months, maybe years, my hands rested in my lap without tension. My breath dropped deeper into my lungs. My mind quieted. I wasn't waiting for the next conversation. I wasn't bracing for the next request. I wasn't shrinking to make space for others. The world around me had not changed dramatically. My family still lived here, bills still needed paying, and life still hummed forward. But inside me, the ground had shifted. Not like an earthquake, more like a door unlocking after being stuck for too long. And the breeze that passed through felt like something I had been missing without realizing it. Freedom. A few days later, the house settled into a new rhythm, one I barely recognized but welcomed quietly, like a long-lost melody humming its way back into my memory. There was less tension, fewer hushed conversations behind closed doors. The agreement in the drawer didn't loom over the household like a threat. Instead, it anchored us, each of us knowing where we stood. Still, I sensed something lingering around the edges, a hesitation, a kind of unfinished business that hadn't yet shown its face. It revealed itself on a Thursday morning. I had just finished sweeping the porch when a white sedan pulled into the driveway. I didn't recognize it, but the seal on the door, County Code Administration told me enough. The man who stepped out wore a neatly pressed shirt and carried a tablet. He checked the house number, then walked up with a smile too professional to be casual. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes," I said, gripping the broom handle lightly. "I'm here for the follow-up inspection," he explained. "We received updated occupancy documents from you. Nothing to worry about, just a routine verification." Routine. That word again. I invited him in, wiping my shoes on the mat out of habit. Inside, the house looked lived in but tidy. Toys tucked in baskets, a faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. He walked through each room, tapping notes onto his device. When he reached the basement, he paused in front of the shelves lined with neatly labeled boxes. "You're organized," he said. I smiled. Paper remembers better than people do. He chuckled and continued with his checklist. After a few more minutes, he finished and stepped into the living room. "Everything looks in order," he said. "But I did want to ask, there was some confusion from a previous form submitted last month. Someone listed this home as planned for transfer. That's been voided now, so no problem. Just wanted to confirm the correction came from you." My pulse slowed, not sped. A peculiar calm washed over me, the kind that comes when puzzle pieces finally click. "Yes," I said. "That correction came from me." He nodded, satisfied. "Good. Paperwork all matches now." As he left, he added, "You'd be surprised how often people forget whose name is on what." I closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a moment. Not from shock, just from confirmation. Someone had tried to set something in motion before I even saw the brochure and the quitclaim deed. A form Brittany must have filed or drafted, maybe assuming I'd sign papers blindly, maybe thinking she could adjust it later. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was simply resolved. When Daniel came home for lunch, I mentioned the inspector casually while slicing strawberries. His eyebrows shot up. "Inspector? For what?" "Paperwork cleanup," I said. "It's taken care of now." He opened the fridge slowly, shoulders tense. "Mom, did we cause that?" "You caused confusion," I said gently. "Nothing that can't be corrected." He closed the fridge door and turned to me. "We didn't mean for things to go that far." "I know," I said. "But once something is sent to an office, any office, it becomes real. People forget that government forms aren't hypothetical, they're commitments." He sank into a chair, elbows resting on his knees. "I'm learning." "I can see that," I said. He left for work a few minutes later, quieter but steadier. His guilt didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt instructional, like a lantern he finally chose to carry. That afternoon, Brittany texted me asking if she could pick up groceries on her way home. A small gesture, but meaningful. When she returned, she set bags on the counter and said, "I got extra coffee for you, the brand you like." I thanked her, and she gave a shy smile before helping me put things away. Later, as the kids sprawled across the living room floor with craft supplies, I stepped out to the backyard. The sky was the color of soft ash, clouds drifting low as if they were thinking deeply about something. I wandered toward Harold's old tool shed, running my hands along the chipped paint on the door. Inside, everything smelled of sawdust and time. His handwriting still marked jars of screws and nails. His level and measuring tape lay exactly where he'd left them years ago. I breathed deeply, feeling the ghost of his steadiness surround me. He would have been proud, not that I stood up to our son, but that I stood up for myself. As I walked back toward the house, I saw the porch light flicker on automatically, washing the steps in warm yellow. Through the kitchen window, Daniel and Brittany were talking softly while cleaning up dinner plates. For once, it wasn't hurried or strained. It looked almost like a family again. Not perfect, not magical, but balanced. The kind of balance that comes only when everyone finally understands that peace is a shared responsibility, not something one person carries alone. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. The latch clicked softly, a small, satisfying sound, a sound that, to me, felt exactly like closure where it was needed, and opening where it mattered most. The next morning began the way I wish all mornings did, quiet, unhurried, touched by a sense of ordinary peace. The house smelled faintly of toast and warm laundry. A soft breeze drifted through the kitchen window, carrying the scent of spring rain from somewhere down the street. It felt like a home again, not a battlefield disguised as one. Daniel left early for a meeting at the bank, his tie a little crooked, his shoes barely polished. Brittany took the kids to school, waving from the car with a warmth I hadn't seen from her in months. And for the first time in a long while, I found myself alone in the house for more than an hour. Silence, real silence, settled around me. Not the tense kind, the healing kind. I poured myself a cup of coffee, strong, dark, the way Harold always liked it, and settled at the dining table with my quilting supplies. Sunlight spread across the wood in soft stripes, and the rhythm of stitching pulled me into an easy calm. Fabric has always told the truth for me. Every seam a decision, every knot a lesson. Around 10, my phone buzzed with a message from the attorney. Your file is fully updated. Everything is in your favor. If you ever need me again, don't hesitate. I smiled, not because I expected to need him again, but because I finally believed that if I did, I could reach out without shame or hesitation. That was a kind of freedom I hadn't known I was missing. A little after noon, I decided to venture out into town. The air was cool, crisp, carrying hints of rain even though the sky was mostly clear. I walked slowly, feeling the familiar sidewalk beneath my shoes, nodding hello to neighbors I'd known for decades. Some waved from their porches, others stopped to chat. Looking well, Evelyn, old Mr. Richards said, leaning on his cane by the mailbox. I'm feeling lighter, I replied honestly. At the cafe downtown, a tiny place with squeaky chairs and the best tuna melt in the county, I bumped into someone I hadn't seen in years, Lydia Harrison, my old co-worker from the library. Her hair had gone white, but her laugh was unchanged. Goodness, Evelyn Carter, she said, hugging me warmly. You look like a woman who just solved something big. I couldn't help but laugh. Maybe I did. We sat together, catching up. She told me about her grandchildren, her volunteer work, the pottery class she'd taken up last fall. I told her about the house, the paperwork, the boundaries I'd finally learned to set. She listened carefully, eyes soft with understanding. You know, she said, stirring her tea, people think getting older means shrinking, but I think it means sharpening. You start seeing what truly matters. Her words settled into me like roots going deeper. After lunch, I stopped by the hardware store to buy a new porch light bulb, then wandered into the thrift shop next door. I found a small ceramic bowl, sky blue, hand-glazed, imperfect in the most beautiful way. I bought it without thinking. Later, it would sit on my nightstand, holding my wedding ring and a few loose coins, but in that moment, it felt like a symbol of something new opening inside me. When I got home, the house was alive again. The kids were doing homework at the kitchen table, their pencils scratching across worksheets. Brittany was on a video call for work, speaking with a seriousness I hadn't taken the time to notice before. Daniel came in around 5, carrying a folder thick with papers. He set it on the counter with a proud thump. Mom, he said, we got the refinance approved. The relief in his voice felt like cool water. That's wonderful, I said. Truly, he rubbed the back of his neck. We're going to fix the old house, sell it properly this time, maybe even pay off a few lingering things. I nodded. Sounds like you're building something steadier now. His eyes shimmered, just a little. I'm trying. I want to do right by you. You already started, I said. After dinner, lasagna and salad. A simple meal, but one everyone seemed to enjoy. We all settled into different corners of the house. The kids watched a show in the living room. Brittany folded laundry while listening to a podcast. Daniel sat at the dining table reviewing more loan documents, occasionally asking me the meaning of some financial term. Later, when the house grew quiet, I stepped outside onto the porch. A few stars peeked through the thin clouds. The streetlights cast soft circles of gold along the sidewalk. I held on to the porch railing, the wood smooth beneath my fingers, and breathed in deeply. This house had weathered storms, quiet ones, emotional ones, unseen ones. And the thing about storms is that afterward, everything feels clearer. The night breeze brushed against me, gentle as a whispered reminder. I wasn't the woman trembling over a form on her kitchen table anymore. I wasn't the silent fixer of everyone's problems. I wasn't invisible. I was a woman who reclaimed her space, a woman who remembered her worth, a woman who realized she'd spent too many years believing her strength had limits that were never really there. And for the first time in a very long while, the future didn't feel like something closing in. It felt like something opening. The following week, something small but meaningful happened. I woke before sunrise, the sky still hushed and pale, and walked into the kitchen to make coffee. Everything was still, the kind of stillness that only exists when a home is finally at peace. As I reached for the mug Harold bought me on our 20th anniversary, I noticed a note on the counter, written in Daniel's handwriting. Mom, thank you for everything. We're trying to be better. We hope you feel at home again. You deserve that. It wasn't flowery or dramatic, just honest. And honesty, after the months we'd just lived through, felt like a blessing. I poured my coffee and stepped onto the porch. The dawn stretched in soft pink bands over the neighborhood. Cars were still parked, dew clinging to their windshields. A dog barked in the distance, the sound echoing down the sleepy street. I sat on the old swing, feeling the wood creak beneath me in its familiar way. Inside, the house was waking up slowly. Footsteps on the stairs, water running in the bathroom, the faint sound of the toaster popping. But the tension that once filled these walls had dissolved. Instead, I felt something warm rising inside me, something I had almost forgotten, my own life. Later that morning, after the kids left for school and Daniel drove Brittany to the office, I took a quiet walk to the park. The air was cool, the kind that brushes your cheeks like a gentle reminder that you're still here, still breathing, still becoming. I passed a group of older women practicing Tai Chi under the oak trees. Their movements were slow and soft, like waves meeting the shore. One of them waved at me, a woman with silver hair pulled into a bun and the kind of gentle eyes that make you feel known. Come join us sometime, she said. I smiled. Maybe I will. I meant it. On the way home, I stopped at the little bakery on Elm Street. The young man at the counter recognized me. Morning, Mrs. Carter, he said. Cinnamon roll today? I nodded, feeling the simple joy of being seen, not for what I could give, not for what someone needed from me, just seen. Back home, I placed the cinnamon roll on my favorite plate and ate it slowly by the window. Sunlight warmed the table, catching the rim of the little blue ceramic bowl I'd found at the thrift shop. My wedding ring rested inside it, glinting softly. I thought about Harold, not with grief this time, but with gratitude. He had built this house with his hands and his laughter. But I had kept it with my resilience. I had protected it, protected myself, and found a new steadiness in the process. By afternoon, the house filled with familiar noise again. The kids burst through the door talking over each other. Brittany followed carrying groceries, and Daniel rushed in 10 minutes later with a stack of folders from the bank. But this time, the noise didn't overwhelm me. It simply lived beside me. We were no longer a family teetering on the edge of quiet desperation. We were learning, stumbling, forgiving, moving forward. That evening, I stepped outside once more. The sky had turned a soft lavender, the street glowing under the first flicker of porch lights. I wrapped my sweater around myself and breathed in deeply, letting the cool air settle my thoughts. I realized then that my revenge, the only kind I ever wanted, wasn't about winning. It wasn't about making anyone feel small or afraid. It was simply this: reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my home, and as I stood on that porch, watching the lights shimmer across the quiet street, I felt something settle inside me, an understanding I wished I'd learned sooner. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the whisper that finally says, "Enough," and the even softer whisper that follows, "I deserve peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, feel free to like and subscribe, and tell me one thing. If you were in my place, what would you have done?"